Wham. Testing, working, check. Recently, I got asked to colour grade a music video project. Thought it would be an awesome opportunity to show you my process in a step-by-step breakdown. Hopefully this can give you some insight and tips to help you create some amazing looking footage. You should have some new tricks up your sleeve so you can take your music videos to the next level. Let's jump into Resolve. So I started a brand new project in Resolve, dragged in the raw footage, and just pulled 3 clips that I liked onto the timeline, just to use an example for this process. A little bit of background on this music video: it was a full in-house production at OBP, and it was shot on an Ursa Mini G2 in B-roll 8:1, I believe. What makes it much better for us cut grading as we have access to the raw settings. The music artist is by a guy named Smirk, based in London. Amazing guy to work with. The full video is out already, so that's up on YouTube. I will link that in the description. So the first thing I'll normally do is, with any new project, I will jump into project settings, what's the gear icon in the bottom right hand corner, come up to colour management, and we'll get some sort of colour management running for the project. Now personally, I like to do it manually, so I will leave colour science set to DaVinci YRGB, but there is a reason I leave it as DaVinci YRGB when using Blackmagic. If using S-Log or Arilog C, there's a slightly different workflow to that, but because this is a Blackmagic file and there's firmware issues, but I'll explain that a bit further on. Dropping down to timeline colour space, I will change this to DaVinci Y Gamut, as that's the biggest colour space there is to work in and the best. And for output colour space, you want to set it to your monitor. I have my monitor set to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. It's a really common one a lot of people use for delivering to like higher end and online content. Dropping down to camera raw with the next tab. So I would change this to my raw settings, that's Blackmagic Raw in this case. Then under decode using, we want project settings. Now this is what I mentioned earlier about the firmware issue. This project is shot on a Pocket 6K Pro and an Ursa Mini. Now one of them has the new Gen 5 colour science and the older one has the Gen 4 colour science. So to get around that, what we'll do is we'll set the project raw metadata to all Gen 5 colour science. Now if we was not manually doing the colour space, this would create an issue where it don't realise you've done that. So just keep that in mind if you are using Blackmagic footage. Now one of the benefits of having raw footage here is we can debayer that raw footage into any colour space we want. In colour management, we told the timeline colour space to be DaVinci Y Gamut. We can actually get our log footage to debayer straight from camera into DaVinci Y Gamut. So we're almost skipping a step where we would have had to convert that. It was quite convenient with log footage. So now we're done in project settings, just hit save. And you will see a slight change going from your Arilog or your Blackmagic film into DaVinci Y Gamut, just a bit flatter. First thing I will do is drag on my default node graph. Now if you don't have one of those, you can create a solid colour on the timeline, make that a compound clip, right click, new compound, and that will then show up in the timeline. Apply your structure, names, tags, etc. to speed up, give that a save as a still, and you'll have it moving forward for all your project. As you can see, across the top I have exposure, ratio, contrast, and then balance for colour balance. Dropping down into a layer mixer, then outputting from our DaVinci Y Gamut colour space we moved into Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, what my display is calibrated to. Now these across the bottom here are all secondaries, so these will be like denoiser, colour secondaries, power windows, but we'll get into that later on. My process involves doing passes. Now I will do a minimum pass through of a grade 2 to 3 times just to get the job done. I understand time is money, but if the money is there to do more passes, you're always going to improve the grade further. So for my first pass, all I want to do is exposure and contrast. I want to ignore all colour casts, all mistakes, anything wrong, just focusing on the exposure and levels of where the luminance values land. I'm going to pass through these 3 clips using my control surface down here. I've just realised that I'm doing a screen recording and you guys can't see my scope, so I'll bring them back in. First things, I'm on my exposure node, using the waveform, just in luminance mode, no colorized on that, and using my grading monitor, I'm just pivoting up and down until I'll find a space that I like, somewhere around there. Then I will quickly jump across the contrast, pump way too much contrast in, just moving the pivot, just got to find the best place where the pivot needs to sit, reset the contrast, and then bring some of that back in. Now another little tip I have is if you found the contrast you like, and the pivot and the brightness, you've got your levels roughly, nothing has to be perfect to this point, you can jump across your log wheel log wheels as I'm doing on my control surface here, and just adjust your shadows. Sometimes I find just the shadows will be set a bit too high for me. In this case I think you're fine, but so here we are again, next clip. Let's add my default node structure, and again I'm just using the offset, moving up and down, trying to find the somewhere around there, moving across, way too much contrast, move the pivot, just finding where I like to pivot from, right there. Then I'll just dial in the amount I feel necessary, jump across to my log, push up the shadows a little bit because I don't want to lose any detail down there, and a little before and after, looking good. If I can highlight both of them changes, see, tiny changes, just the first pass, nothing has to be finished at this point. On to the next clip, enter our default node structure, and again we are just moving up and down, finding the best spot to leave it somewhere around there. Jump across to my ratios, remember too far, pivot around, see, showing us we've got to be really careful of them lights in the back wall over there. Now across the log wheels, adjusting, maybe pull them lights down a little bit. So that's pass one done. Now at this point you've gone all the way through your grade, you've done a basic pass, you've tried to get some consistency there, you want all your levels looking the same, and we'll take a break. No rush. I mean, rushing a grade is the #1 way to mess up a grade. So at this point I would take a coffee break. Right, pass 2, we move across to the vector scope, as now we're going to be doing balance, so colour contrast, colour cast. Again, similar concept where nothing has to be finished at this point, we're just trying to get a consistency amongst images, and we're just going to do another pass. So using the offset wheel, just a big one, not using any individual highlights or shadows at this point. We're just going to start pushing and pulling that image, using that vector scope to try and centre it, to create the contrast of colour. Pushing up to magenta, down to your greens, back and forth it. See, this had some kind of greeny yellow tint in it, what we've removed. It's looking loads better there. Again, I'm just wheeling the offset wheel, pulling it, using the vector scope, using my grading monitor. Pushing back and forth between the green and magenta, trying to look for any casts. And somewhere around there. On and off that, just to see it. Maybe that's a bit too cold, push it back a little bit. Yep, I like the way that's looking. To the next one. And again, this one we've obviously got a lot of RGB lighting, some high saturated values in there, but we'll just start pulling it towards the centre, pushing it around, seeing where it looks good and bad. See if we can get any complementary colours down on that hue wheel. On and off that. It's got some nice separation coming on, might have gone a bit far, push back. That's looking quite cool. Maybe I'll cool it off a bit. Yeah, somewhere around there is looking fine. And obviously on a full grade we'd be watching the clips back, looping them, spending a lot more time. But so yeah, that's pass number 2. Now we've got exposures and colour cast removed. If we just have a quick watch through, we can see the clips are starting to come together. Yeah, nicely. It's starting to get a nice balance in there. Nothing looks out of place. Now, moving on to pass number 3. We'll be looking at secondaries. Now, a train of thought I like to keep when going through for a pass like this is, where is the viewer's eye meant to be directed to? So for example, on this one, I might use a tilt shift plugin, the one that comes built in Resolve, and just run that down the artist's face, hitting the highlight so we can see, moving over to A and B. Then down here on my control surface, I'm just widening up the coverage of the blur, moving it a bit more central, and turning highlights off. It's too strong. Remember, everything in little subtle adjustments. So I'll turn that down. I like the around 2 to 3 zone. Again, really subtle, not doing a major amount, but just again drawing the viewer's eye to where it needs to be. And similar concept with a window if you want us to do that. I'm sure we've all done this before. When making windows, it's really good to look how the light falls in the scene. And the bigger, the softer the window, the better the job you're doing. The less light is for someone to spot it. Now, we've all seen that bad colour grade where we've spotted a window. Don't be that guy. I tend not to touch the highlights or shadows when working with windows. I kind of play with the gamma because I like to remain the shadows and highlights where they are. So this one just kind of darkening off the edge around the artist again, and we come back and forth that. Let's turn the window off. Not doing a major amount, so just highlight both of them. You know, again, we're just drawing the viewer's attention to where it needs to be. I would also do any stabilisation if it's needed at this point to remove any shakes. Denoise if you've got noisy shot. You know, you can just, and like I said, you can do multiple passes at this point. You might do some face refinement stuff. You might like to pull his hat out a little bit, push the greens more in there if we just jump across the curves. And if we hit a new serial node, jump across the curves, we can get the saturation on that green and just try and push it up a tad. So yeah, and that's about it. And I jump across to the next clip. Again, it's kind of really all focused on the center of the shot. I would probably do a window down the middle, and again, aspect nice and big, nice and soft. Invert that so we've got the outside selected, and just on the gamma wheel, I'm coming down on either edge just to draw your attention in before and after. Really subtle but effective. Yeah, so coming up to the last clip, I might just pull out some of that magenta in the background. That is just drawing your attention away from the artist. Pull out, maybe make it a bit more complementary, spin it towards blue. See how that looks. Yeah, that helps a little. Before and after that. Yeah, it's looking good. Tiny amounts, pulling it back when needed. The last things I want to touch on in this video would be my timeline nodes. I have a look node, a film grain node, and a halation node. And while I have nothing on the look node in this, that will be something I do directly after colour management. I would go in and make a creative look or use a LUT and build on top of it. Otherwise you'll be undoing all your hard work that you did exposing and balancing and colour casting. For film grain, I use film convert. I just turn down all the film luma and chroma and literally just adjust the gain slider to something I like. Probably zoom in a bit, and you know, just probably can't see this because of YouTube compression, but final halation. Sometimes I use the dehancer one, sometimes use the built-in Blackmagic one. There's not a lot in it, but yeah, for that I just come over to where I think, like say, his chain was a really prominent part, and if you look on before and after of that, you can see that, or maybe you can't see with YouTube compression, but it's doing a tiny amount in there, just getting that more organic looking image. We can turn all the grade off. First thing we did was convert it into Rec 709. Next we did exposure with the offset wheel. After that we added some contrast. After that we balanced out the colours. And then after that we did some secondary work, windows and tilt shift blur, and put a bit of colour into his green hat. And yeah, it's starting to look nice. You get how the process comes together. You know, like I said, the analogy of sanding something down, each pass, tiny adjustments, really gets you to that nice looking image, what we're all after. So yeah, that's my process really, step by step. There's always going to be challenges, and you're going to have to step in and out of your normal workflow to fix those. No two grades are going to be exactly the same. It's just about fixing problems, as all filmmaking is, I guess. I hope you found some value from this, and if anyone has any questions or thinks I should go into details about any of the subjects, just please comment below. I love hearing from my viewers, and I'd love to do that video. So if you enjoyed the video and want to see more, please like and subscribe, hit the bell icon, and I'll catch you in the next one.